It's 7:45. The rights of crime victims are getting increasing attention in our criminal justice system. Just recently, in a pretrial hearing for the O.J. Simpson case, prosecutor Marcia Clark brought the role of victims to the fore.
The minimal task of the criminal trial is to stand by victims, to restore their dignity, to find a way for them to think of themselves, once again, as men and women equal to all others.
Marcia Clark was quoting from a new book called With Justice for Some. It was written by law professor George Fletcher. Professor Fletcher, good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Katie. Those are wonderful words to wake up to, I must say.
This is an angry book. You're mad.
I was mad when I wrote it, yes. The book was born in the aftermath of the first Rodney King verdict in Simi Valley. And at the time, I had the feeling that everyone was blaming either the jury in Simi Valley or they were blaming the residents of South Central Los Angeles. But no one took a look at the legal system. Lawyers are very reluctant to blame themselves and say the problem is ours. The problem is that we have a defective legal system in the United States, and it's very difficult for us to face up to that.
How is it defective?
It's defective because we focus entirely on the rights of the accused. Now, it's important. I'm not in any way opposed to the civil libertarian advances of the Warren Court. We should focus on the rights of the accused. But every European legal system also takes into consideration the rights and the dignity of the victims. And that's the side that we have forgotten in the United States.
First, let me say that I think it's a wonderful thing that you have the Goldman family here on the show. I believe you have a strong constitutional right to speak out. It's imperative that you speak out. There's absolutely no way that you're going to keep Bob Shapiro and Alan Dershowitz quiet in the media. They're going to use the media for every advantage that they can seek. It is critically important that you speak out. It is critically important that the Brown family speak out. You have a very important role to play. Not only...
Is it important, though? Because
yes,
doesn't it affect our opinion of
I think there are two trials that are going on. One is the formal trial that's going on in the courtroom, and there is also an informal trial, a trial for the opinion of history.
The Furman factor. You've got a city here that has been torn apart by riots, by racial tensions, and you've got a racist on the police force that's an acknowledged racist who comes on the scene and starts off as almost the chief investigating officer, finding the key evidence, writing the key words down, doing all the important things. This jury is going to look at him, and they're not going to want to believe him.
Let's watch the language about acknowledged racist, right? We have some incidents 10 years ago. His partner was an African-American. There are no documented incidents in the recent years of any kind of racism or any problem in his deportment.
That's going to be proof that he's changed? He's now not a racist?
Well, look, come on. Let's be honest. I mean, everyone's past. Racism is such a pervasive problem in the United States, and it's such a pervasive problem in police departments, that if you defense lawyers could win a case just by saying an officer was a racist, you would have very little work to do. You'd win them all. It'd be so simple. All you have to do is come out and show the fact of life is that racism is a pervasive phenomenon. That does not mean that officers plant evidence. They have some commitment to the job. They have some concern about their professional future. They don't play games of that sort.
I want to show you a piece of... Hold it.
Drew from New York said it's not necessarily individuals pursuing fame as much as the mass media propagating it. So how much of this, you know, it's almost a chicken and an egg kind of question, Professor Fletcher?
Well, I think in most cases, the fame gained represents Andy Warhol's great statement that everyone gets 15 minutes in the limelight. And I think for Rosa Lopez, it will be here today and gone tomorrow. I think she's the focus of attention. Now, actually, I think Rosa Lopez behaves as though she owns the courtroom. I think to some extent we have this situation of a woman who conveys the image of being so modestly educated, poor, afraid, and yet, in fact, she controls the entire scene. Under ordinary circumstances, a witness who threatened to leave the jurisdiction would be put in protective custody. But instead of that, the judge turns the entire trial upside down in order to allow this special interrogation. I think it's actually an amazing form of deference to the power of a woman who looks frail, but is in fact very powerful in her personality.
But what this poll reflects, I think, is something else that's very serious. Obviously, the public doesn't really know exactly which civil liberties are at stake and how they might be violated and whether your proposal would violate them or not. Right? So what the poll reflects is a negative attitude towards civil liberties in our society. That's our failure. Somehow, we as a profession have not communicated adequately the positive and valuable significance of civil liberties. And the reason is because we frequently find a situation in which we have a lopsided view of the criminal process, in which we emphasize solely the rights of the accused. We don't really have a conception of a fair trial for both sides. And as a result, people and the public as a whole has a negative view on what civil liberties mean in practice.
George Fletcher, question to Alan Dershowitz, asked by our producer. Are we experiencing a loss of faith in the system to convict criminals or prevent terrorism that could lead us toward a police state? Quote, Dershowitz, yes, this is Fletcher. The first rantings of a police state is victims' rights. Strengthen the government. But the FBI is much more likely to investigate the left than the right. The FBI is not. Anyway, the first rantings of a police state is victims' rights.
There is a victims' rights movement that I do not participate in, which is clearly a law and order movement that says we have to do everything possible to protect victims against crime.
But you are quoted by them, George, all the time.
You're quoted by some people you wouldn't want to associate with either, Alan.
No, but
that's not the point. The point is that there are victims' rights movements that are clearly right-wing in orientation, that stand. I mean, look, the militia quotes the Constitution too, right? So that doesn't mean anything. The fact of the matter is that there are ways to approach victims' rights that are compatible with civil liberties, that are compatible with the rights of the accused, and that's the movement that I am trying to support.
I agree with.
George, help us out. What are we talking about here? It seems like such a crazy array of what some people call designer defenses.
Well, that's a good term for it, because in fact, there are many different cuts that seem to fit under one general pattern. And the general argument is that the defendant is not personally to blame for what appears to be an obvious criminal act. So in the Menendez brothers case, it's obvious that they've committed a criminal act, and they argue that there's some basis for reducing the blame that is properly laid to their charge. The argument is really not simply abuse. The argument is a curious doctrine in California that they acted in good faith self-defense. And the abuse argument just came in as a way of supporting their good faith belief that their parents were about to kill them. I think that the use of the abuse material there was total nonsense. And
You're a doubter about some of this stuff.
Oh yes, I think it's utter nonsense. But I think that it's also important to point out that that journalists take these claims much more seriously than juries do. I think that's not really the strategy of the defense here. I think that's the formal analysis, which is correct. But I think what they're really trying to do in playing to the jury is something like this. This man has used the N-word. He is a racist. If he is a racist, he and the other cops who work with him do not deserve to be believed. It's not whether they had the opportunity, whether they really did it. They forfeit. It's a credibility issue. And it's not only credibility. They forfeit their right to convict O.J. if they are racist. That's the basic idea. And that has nothing to do with credibility, planting evidence. It's a version of the exclusionary rule. That is, if you violated the Constitution, you can't get a conviction. If you're a racist, you shouldn't be able to get a conviction. That's not the law, but I think that it is the implicit strategy of the defense. How are you, Alan?
Fine, thank you.
Things are going well on the account. I'm very pleased, but I have something I have to share with you. You know that I'm very active in feminist causes. I have been for some time, and the other evening, I was over at the Centennial Club. Centennial, it's 100% male. 100% male. They don't let women in, even for lunch, right? And this is a place where very important contacts are made in our city. And you know what happened to me? I was there in front of the club, carrying out a demonstration. We were chanting. We were carrying placards. And whom do I see leaving the club but Alex over here? Alex Alert leaves the club. He's in from the members' door only. So I said, Alex, are you a member? He says, yes, of course I'm a member over here. One thing that you've all taught me today is that it helps to maintain a sense of humor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.